Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I am really excited for the guest joining us today. We have Moira Khan. She is an international grief educator and coach. Moira, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you, Heather. It's just such a pleasure, and I'm so honoured to be here. It's been coming a while, I think, because we've been so backwards and forwards with things, and it's been so nice to get to know you over Instagram and in our griefy world. It's really lovely.
Moira and I connected over through our mutual friend, Kara, with Get Griefy magazine and that lovely community there. So, Moira, for those of our listeners that don't know, do you mind sharing a bit about what brought you to the griefy education coaching world and maybe share a bit about your personal story that led you to creating Griefspan?
Sure, thank you. Mine's a little bit complex in the sense of I've suffered multiple losses over the years, and so I'll try and break it down a little bit. Mine is parent loss and sibling loss. There's some very complicated grief in there and cumulative stuff. I've only been, I think, certified about 2 years ago as a grief educator and coach, and then a year ago I set up Griefspan Education on Instagram, and it's created a really big community, and it was something I'd been wanting to do for a while, but it's been a real labour of love and passion for me because of my story and my past of what's happened as far as my losses go. My first real loss was my mother in 2014. And it was quite sudden because she hadn't been particularly unwell, but she didn't have anything terminal. But she had rheumatoid arthritis most of her life. And so I'd always known Mum as struggling with pain and physical disabilities and things like that she couldn't do certain things. But as she got older, her body started to fail her even more. And it was end of August 2014, and I just found out that I was pregnant for the first time, and we were so excited, as you can imagine. And we'd had this journey of 2 years of trying to get pregnant as well, so we've been struggling with that, and it was just such an exciting time for us. So our parents knew. We couldn't hold the information, we just had to tell them as soon as we found out, which was nice. And then a week later my mum got taken into hospital. At the time it didn't seem serious. I was living in the UK, my parents were in New Zealand, and I'd been living in the UK for quite a few years. I didn't get on a plane at the first sort of news of her going into hospital because Dad said, look, it's okay, it doesn't look too bad at the moment. She had very low iron levels and things like that, and a few complications with it. But as days went on, it looked like it was getting a little bit more serious, and she contracted pneumonia as well. So it tended to go downhill quite fast, and I had a gut feeling that this wasn't going to end well. And so I said to my husband Ali at the time, I said to him, I have to go. I've just got to go. Obviously it was a worry because I was only just early pregnancy and we were both a little bit concerned about that, but I had no doubts I had to go. Worst 27-hour plane ride of my entire life. Yeah, that trip to New Zealand from the UK is pretty lengthy, and even worse when you have morning sickness.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it was a pretty nauseating trip. But by the time I got to New Zealand, Mum had declined even more. It was tough, but I got there just in time. It was about 2 days later that she passed away. She knew I was there, which was lovely, and I got to spend some time with her and just hold her hand before she went, with my brother and my dad there as well. So that was devastating and traumatic, and I've lost my mum just as I'm about to become a mum, and the one person you want to be there is just not there. And I didn't deal with it very well. I say that, but I didn't actually grieve in those first few months. I really didn't, because I was so focused on the baby. I spent 5 weeks back home with my dad, making sure he was okay before I had to go back to the UK. And my husband was able to join me in New Zealand as well. But it was just so hard trying to manage him as well as baby and being pregnant and everything else, that I just don't think I took the grief on myself.
The capacity.
No, not really, I don't think. And I think I was in that shock. I was in denial. And just like I say, I was focusing on my dad a lot, managing him from afar. because he wasn't well either at that point. He was physically not really able to look after himself fully. So we'd had to get carer for him at home and that kind of stuff as well. So that was complicated as well. And yeah, so it was not the happiest of pregnancies, I have to say, which was disappointing, but these things happen. And it wasn't until after my little girl was born that it really hit me. And the doctors then, they just put it down to postpartum blues and depression and that kind of stuff. But in reality, I was just grieving. I was in real grief, and I had a C-section for when Lara was born, and that didn't go to plan either, and they ended up going under general anaesthetic. And when I came out of that, all I wanted was my mum. I just could not think of anything else. It was just all about mum. And of course, Dad knew that Lara was coming, but it was just, I wanted my mum. It's normal, right? Yeah, so that was pretty devastating. And so Dad was on his own, health ailing. So I had a brother as well. There was only two of us as growing up, just the four of us in New Zealand. And we had a great life. My brother was 7 years older than me, so we weren't particularly tight-knit because we had that age gap. So I was at home on my own for a long time whilst he went to university. So it was a bit of a distant relationship. And then as we got older, we became a lot closer. He was absolutely amazing, my brother. And he hadn't been well either, unfortunately. And he had some mental health issues after he had a nervous breakdown, and then he developed a lot of other physical issues, including his heart. And he had been to the UK to see me in 2016, and he wasn't well then, and he was waiting for a heart surgery. And so a couple of months later, he went for this heart surgery. He was healing, but not what they had thought he would be like, and it hadn't worked particularly well. It was a big open heart surgery too. 14 months later, he was starting to go back to work and seemed okay, but he was just easing back into work. He went on a trip for a couple of nights, staying in a hotel, and I had been pregnant again with our second one and just had my son in the November of 2017. And 4 weeks later, I got a call to say Alistair, my brother, who was gone, dead, and sudden heart attack. So he wouldn't have suffered. It was just so sudden. He died in the shower. But yeah, and again, I'm postpartum, another new baby, another death, and I have to call Dad and tell him that his son has died. And he's now in a retirement home as well, being looked after. And we'd moved my dad to the town in New Zealand so that he could be closer to my brother, which was the ironic thing. And then this happened. So yeah, there's lots of moving parts and things to contend with. It's a lot when you on your own as a child on the other side of the world, trying to navigate loss of your mum, loss of now your brother as well, and an ailing father from a distance with two babies.
Goodness,
there's never a dull moment in my life, I have to say. But it's a journey, that's for sure. So now on to the third one, my dad. So we were planning on a move to Spain. Things just tended to get so much after I lost mum and my brother, and my husband had got this job in Madrid, and he was travelling backwards and forwards from here anyway, and the company offered to move us. And at the time, like the first time we ever got offered this, I was like, no, I'm not going. We've just bought a house. I was pregnant. Not going. It's fine. But after everything that happened, now the kids are quite little, it's like the perfect time. I just said to Ali, I said, let's just do it. Let's just go, because what's the worst that can happen? We can always come back. So yeah, we started the move to Spain, and we were here by June 2018, and it was great. But I was still having to navigate trying to look after Dad. Didn't matter where I moved to, I was still having to do that and look after him and know that he was okay. He was in a retirement home at that stage, so he was being well looked after. But he had a lot of health issues, similarly, heart as well, was losing his eyesight, had neuropathy in his feet, so couldn't walk very much either. So he was physically, luckily brain, fantastic, which was a godsend because my dad was such an intellectual, loved conversation. We'd talk on the phone for an hour and a half minimum. Every week was a minimum, which is hard when you've got two little ones, but it's okay. I loved it, I loved it. And I miss those so much. And that was him. So he was fine mentally, which was great. And I think it was about sort of April time 2019 and I needed to go home again to move him into more care, into palliative care. So I had to go home. I took the 2 little ones with me to New Zealand on my own. Big flight.
Brave mama. Wow.
Yeah, I think it was it wasn't a smart move, but it was a long trip. Let's put it that way. You make friends on a flight that long when you say, can you hold the baby? So it was an interesting one, but I needed to do it because I wanted at least the kids to have some memory by way of photos. Of course, they won't remember, but that they met their granddad and he got to meet them. And so that was nice. I'm so pleased I did that, no matter how hard the trip was, how difficult it was. And I knew at that point that was potentially the last time I would see him. And so I left New Zealand basically saying goodbye to Dad, and there was phone calls in between, but he went downhill over the next few months. And then by December, Christmas Eve, he went, and that was it. That's my family gone. And Dad and I were very close. Mum and I were too, obviously, as well, but in a different relationship. And Dad and I were very alike and had a lot in common. And I really miss him. I was so devastated when he went. And it was really difficult because I couldn't go home again either because I just had major foot surgery and couldn't get on a flight. Yeah. And when I went to plan to do it again, to say goodbye and do the funeral and wrap up the estate and do all of that stuff, COVID hit.
My goodness. Oh,
I know, you can't make this stuff up, right?
Yeah. As you were sharing the dates, I'm like, we're getting closer and closer to COVID. So and then not being able to go and wrap that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really stuck in that kind of limbo. I was grieving during lockdown and I couldn't have any closure. There was no closure to go and say goodbye or get that big piece of what I wanted to do to say goodbye to him, to honour him, to share his legacy, and I couldn't do it. And that was probably my worst time in my grief, I think, because I had all the other grief I was dealing with as well. I think I just literally fell off the bus at that point. Everybody lost lots in lockdown and went through so much, of course. In Spain, it was really tough. Like, we had 100 days of lockdown, like literally not going anywhere. It was really tough. And yeah, when you're grieving and looking after babies at that time, I think I might have lost the plot a little bit and drank a little bit much, but so did everyone else, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad that I have this mindset. I can laugh about it now in the sense of that it's not funny, but it's just that I look back at it and I think, holy moly, what on earth did I do to deserve all of this? I could go down that route, but now look where I am, in a sense of that I've taken all of this and to make a difference for other people, and that's what I wanted to do. It might have taken me a long time to get there, but it's always going to be a journey, right? It's always going to be a journey, no matter how long it takes.
And you took the time you needed to get to the capacity, the focus, the space to process and to create and connect with others through that. And that takes time to get there.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. You can't rush any of this at all.
No, grief is not a sprint.
No, it's not. It's absolute marathon, an endless marathon. But that's okay. I know you know the feelings, and it's just so up and down all the time. And when you're dealing with more than one as well, dealing with my mum was hard enough, and then throw in the rest of my family. And I think that's the biggest part, is when you don't feel like you belong anywhere anymore. You've lost your anchor, you've lost your home, basically. I can't think about going back to New Zealand now because, as much as I'd love to, I have lots of friends there still, but there's lots of memories and nice ones, obviously, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. It's my childhood, it's my youth, it's everything that I loved and I love, but it's just very different now. And that's what happens when you're in grief and you lose things and people you love. Yeah.
Those touchstones. Yeah.
I resonate with that.
Yeah. You want to go back, you have good memories, they're still friends, but like you said, anchors, I use that with a lot of my clients. Touchstones, they hold different weight and memory and emotion. And when we don't have access to those in the same way, it's hard to engage in those spaces without just falling apart or being overwhelmed or really activated. Thank you for sharing about your mom and dad and Alistair, and it's an honor to get to hear about them and your story.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be able to share it because they mean the world to me still, and I think about them every single day, and it does help. That's the big thing, tell that to my clients all the time and people that I share the story with, because it helps. I don't want anyone to be afraid to ask me about all of this, even though it feels like a lot and people might need a lifetime to hear my story because it's so long. But I don't mind sharing it anymore. I'm pleased I can, because it means that my mum and my dad and my brother are helping others. It's huge for me. That's really nice.
Yeah, that legacy piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then with Griefspan, that's such an interesting name. I think that's great. So can you share a bit about what that phrase means for you and how that influenced the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. It's a nice story for me too, because it has a real meaning behind it, and it's to do with my dad, mainly because grief spans a lifetime, and I also have the kind of the bridge in my marketing logo and stuff, things like that as well. And my dad had a company when I was growing up, and him and I actually created the logos together. We drew stuff together to form this thing called Timespan. And Dad was a prolific writer about all things events, world events, history. He just loved writing, and he'd write journals, he'd write these stories, and he had these pieces called time span pieces about world events or historical moments or things that he had his views on. And I have all of these in storage and here behind me, and I just have not gone through all of them yet. Anyway, so this little company that he had, and also Dad was a photographer, so he used to capture moments, and Timespan was all part of that as well. So together with writing and photography, it was called Timespan. And it just resonated. I didn't even have to think about when I was setting up my grief business, that was going to be it. Griefspan was it. It just rang, it has meaning, it's all about my dad. And yeah, and the bridge is also for a reason, because my dad was an engineer and he loved bridges. He just had a thing about bridges. So wherever I went in the world and came to the UK, and every bridge I went, I had to take a photo for Dad because he loved bridges. And I've lost count of how many photos I've got of different bridges. But of course, then I went to New York, and that was another whole world. So yeah, it's just been nice because he's lived his life a little bit vicariously through me before he left, and I was able to give that to him. And now I can still keep giving the things to him because of Griefspan, because it's named after him. And yeah, it's quite special.
That's so special. Also, I never, in all the months that I've heard about Griefspan, I never thought that it was like, oh, like lifespan. That's brilliant.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. And it's because actually people do say it to me. It spans a lifetime.
That's
Yeah.
so relatable. So then in the grief work that you do as a grief educator, grief coach, where do you see some of the biggest gaps in how people understand and engage with their grief?
Yeah, there's two elements that I wanted to achieve through what I do. And obviously, one of those is helping people through their grief, walking them through their grief, and helping them with in any way that I can with the knowledge that I have, and also ability. That's the big key, isn't it, for people in our work? People come to you because they know you can relate, and grief education and grief coaching is not really well known yet. It's very new. A lot of people don't know about it. It's not about therapy. It's all about just being heard and their grief validated. And so that's the one arm of what I really love doing as well. And the other side of it is educating people about how to respond to others through grief and with grief. And that's a really big task. That's something that is not known very well in today's society. And obviously, I feel like we're scratching the surface and we're getting there. But it's a big key where people just don't talk about it. And we don't educate people on grief. When they do eventually lose people, then they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to talk about it. And so it's all combined, right? Everything I do is people are talking about their grief, and if they share their grief, it helps with their healing and all the rest of it. But there's also this other side of, what do I say to someone when they're grieving? What do I do? What do I say? All of those things that I put on my page as my content. And my Instagram page is full of content about things like that. What do you say to someone when it's grieving, or what don't you say, which is important too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's just so many things now as well. And I love podcasts like yours, and I see quite a few more now. Maybe that's just because I'm in this griefy space with you guys, but I didn't realize until I started Griefspan how big it is. You know, there is a really big grief space, and I didn't realize that before. So it is nice to know that it's out there and the help is there, and people like you and I are there to help others through their grief.
Being more in the like proactive grief space, like I niched my business down about a year and a half ago. I had went to school to become a grief therapist after my own loss, but I didn't even know there were grief coaches. I didn't even know that was a thing when I was first grieving. And I wish I had, because the therapist that I was trying to work with at the time, like they didn't know what to do with me. They made me watch VHS tapes. Like it
No
was,
way.
oh, legit. That's, if you haven't read edition 5 of Get Griefy magazine, that's what my article is about,
Oh,
is
of
from
course.
VHS
Yes.
tapes
Oh my
to,
goodness. Yes.
becoming a therapist. And because I didn't know that grief coaching was a thing, because we live in such a grief illiterate, grief phobic society. Clinicians, we don't really get trained in how to do grief work. I had to seek grief training out on my own because I wanted to speak the language. Like I knew it personally, but I didn't know how to speak the language professionally. And it's,
Yeah.
so I think spaces like yours, where it's talking about how grief is spanning the lifespan, is normalizing, educating, empowering people to own their grief experience. I think it's so important and such a vital piece to, like you said, that relatability to feeling seen, because each loss is so unique and grief compounds and mixes together. It's important for us to have spaces and people we can talk about to feel seen and validated and
Yeah.
know what the heck we're doing while we're grieving.
I know. It really makes my heart ache when I see someone really stuck in their grief. I know people generally want to try and fix people, but that's not how it works. But it still makes my heart ache when I see someone going through this, knowing what it's like. Now I know what it's like. And it started quite early in the sense of that I lost my parents quite a few years before my now other friends are starting to lose theirs. And obviously a lot of them haven't lost a brother or sister either. But I don't remember, I think at the time I was quite foggy, and I don't remember really how I was as a person or as a friend at that particular time, or how I even managed my grief when I first lost mum. And I did ask my best friend actually not long ago, I said, what was I like when I lost my mum? Because I can't remember. It all feels very fuzzy now.
Yeah.
She says, oh, you were pretty distant. There was certain things, and she told me a few bits and pieces, but unless someone really knows what you're going through, they can't relate. And I wouldn't want anyone to. Like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Absolutely not. But we're all going to go through it at some stage. Doesn't matter when it is. We're all going to deal with grief. I've lost a lot of other people too. Like, I've lost aunties and uncles. I've lost some really close friends who were quite young when they died. They're still losses for me. And it doesn't feel normal, but I don't know what normal is anymore, to be quite honest.
Grief is the new normal. Moira, grief is the new
normal. There we go. I love that. Grief is the new normal in a sense. Yeah. And things are changing. Like, for example, in the UK, they've just passed something along the lines of that grief will become part of an education program in schools.
Amazing.
Which is really, it's progress, right? It's really cool. And things like that. We don't have a lot of grief leave in places like the UK or Spain. It doesn't exist at all much, I don't think. But in the UK, I only had 2 days paid leave when I lost my mum. And granted, the company I worked for was an American company at the time. I was lucky because they were just so good to me that they let me stay in New Zealand, and I was able to work from New Zealand. But there's a girl I've got to know through Kira who's doing a petition at the moment for paid bereavement leave of 2 weeks in the UK. So there is more awareness creeping in, which is great. But I thought there's a long way to go. There's still a long way to go.
I'm in the US. We have 3 days. I'm my own boss, so I don't have any paid bereavement leave. But typically it's the 3 days, and there isn't legislature here to try to change that. And we live in a society that's so afraid of death and talking about things ending. And yet it's a universal lived experience we will all go through. And yet we're so youth focused and anti-aging and all of that. And it's like, where can we find the space to make grief more of a normal thing we talk about? And yeah, it's hard. So I love to hear that there's some bill going through to help with, or legislation coming through to help. And the UK, I'm working with a colleague. We're just starting a research project on understanding the education that practitioners get when they're training, whether it's occupational therapy, MDs, therapists. What does the grief education piece look like, so we know how to support people there? And we're actually looking at research done in the UK, because you guys are ahead of us in understanding the importance of grief education and making it a more accessible thing. Yeah, we're behind here in the US in that.
In the UK, I feel like even though they don't want to talk about it, they seem to be quite forward thinking and putting things in place, which is quite interesting. They've always been a very research driven type country. They have some very good high level doctors and medical enthusiasts and people that really research stuff. And I was lucky in the UK too, because they had some really amazing medical assistance that I wouldn't have got had I been anywhere else. Europe is also a really good place for top sort of stuff like that. So I'd like to think it all happened in Spain, but it's not really a thing here. Like, I can't, if I explain grief education or grief coaching to my Spanish friends or anything, they're like, what's that for? And that's not being derogatory or anything. It's just reality. It's just they have a very different perception and way of managing it here, and it's just cultural, and that's different. It's really interesting actually going around different places and finding about how different cultures deal with grief differently, and just the processes as well. It's quite interesting, because in New Zealand, I've been in lots of places now. We're in New Zealand, the UK, here, and everywhere is different. In New Zealand, we deal with it differently again, and there's lots of lovely culture there with the Māori culture, where they really celebrate their loved ones when they die. And they have this sort of mourning 4 days of where they go and see their loved one passed away, and it's actually really beautiful. So there's so many different things I've seen and over the years, and it's really nice actually, as much as death can be a bit morbid, but it's nice to know that these different things are out there.
I think there's so much power in ritual and memorializing, and that meaning making piece is just, it's huge. So when it's built into the culture, I think that's such a gift, because then you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not trying to figure out what feels good. It's like, this is what we do, and this is what we do it as a community. So you're not having to figure it out on your own. Because I think, at least in the States, like, there's so much isolation in grief. And yes, people might show up for the first 4 to 6 weeks, and then you're on your own. Like, you need to quote unquote get back to normal, or what, you're still sad about that. It's just really isolating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we're lucky in the sense that even though we've suffered so much loss, when we do find communities like we've got, I feel like I want to wrap everybody up in that community. Like, everybody that's lost, you just feel like you want to wrap them up in one big griefy blanket and show them that there is something, there is hope. There is hope for life after loss, and it doesn't have to be all about sadness. I mean, we hear this term so much in our industry about that joy and sadness can coexist. In my case, I can honestly say it's true. Of course, I still have my down moments and times and days and sometimes weeks, depending on anniversaries and things like that. But there's a lot of joy to be had as well, and I get joy out of what I do because I'm sharing my mum and dad's story, my brother, and I get to talk about them a lot more than if someone wasn't doing what I'm doing, that's for sure. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I don't know if you find this, but it can be quite exhausting too, but it's a good exhausting in a sense. It's nice as well. But that's like with anything, when you're sharing emotions and you're sharing stories and remembering things a lot. And that's the other thing too, is that I find that when I talk more about them in particular, I might share a story about mum or dad and something else pings into my brain that triggers another memory, which I didn't even know was there, or I thought I'd forgotten. The brain's amazing, right? It just...
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I could go on about that. That's your life. But I just love the fact how much I've learned about the way that the brain handles grief and memory loss and things like that. It's just it's so interesting.
Mary Frances O'Connor wrote The Grieving Brain, and she just came out with The Grieving Body.
I know.
Oh, are you going to show me that too? Like, are we doing both?
I haven't got the body yet, but
I love the Grieving Brain. I think
great.
it's so helpful because I'm sure you've experienced this with your clients and yourself. There's so much executive dysfunction and disorientation and that fog that you're in, and that can last for a while. And it's because your brain's literally like rewiring and trying to make connections where neurons aren't accessible anymore, because those mirror neurons, they don't have the person to light them up in that same way anymore. And so it's just it's exhausting, and there's so much physicality in grieving, and our brains are working so hard to orient to the new normal and all. I wish we had better language for compassion for ourselves, as we understand I'm not crazy, I'm just grieving. Like, I'm not trying to ghost you, I'm just like, I don't make sense to myself anymore. So how do I relate to others in that space? And I think there's so much power in providing grief education to help us feel less alone and less overwhelmed in trying to figure out, what does it mean for me to grieve? What does it mean to exist without my person? And so I'm so grateful for the work that you do and the education that you're providing. I think the more conversations like these we can have, I think the better we're going to figure out, what does it mean to grieve well as a society, and how do we show up for one another, because grief looks different for each person. So not just having a blueprint or throw the 5 stages out, because they don't end. It's
no, exactly.
Grief doesn't wrap up in a pretty bow. It doesn't go away. It just gets different, and we learn how to carry it through different seasons. And but we will always miss our people.
I know. And I really want to touch on something you just said then, because it really resonates with me, as well as, and I'm sure many others, is that people, they're not kind enough to themselves when they are in grief, because they beat themselves up or they have this guilt. And I've done it too. And I still do it from time to time. I try to snap myself out of it, but it's just that you get that build up of, oh, I shouldn't. Why am I so sad about that still? We need to be kinder to ourselves. And that's what I try and tell my clients so much, because the kinder you are to yourself, the more gentle this grief journey will be. And there are so many things that we have to fight on a daily basis without grief. Why add to it? Don't beat yourself up. Don't be so hard on yourself. You are sad. You are having another grief moment, 5, 10 years, however many years down the track. It's normal. It's normalizing just being human and reactive and emotional and all of those things that I try and tell my kids now too, because they see me sad, and I want them to see me. I don't want them to be sad because I'm sad, but I want them to know that it's okay. They're trying to navigate emotions at this age where they don't know how to. And so if I can help them in that way, because I never had that. My parents were grieving and I didn't know they were grieving, because I didn't understand that my mum and dad lost their parents quite early on too when I was in New Zealand. And so I lost my grandparents. I never met my mum's parents. I met my dad's parents, but I lost them quite early on. But they must have been grieving and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Or I wasn't aware, because no one talked about it. No one shared it. It just wasn't the done thing. I might have seen mum shed a few tears or go and hide herself away if she was going to cry or something, but that's it. We never talked about it. We never shared why we were sad, or I miss grandma, or what should I do about it, or those sort of things. You just never talked about it. And so when I tell the kids, I said, this is what your grandma would have done. This is what your granddad would have done. This is what, and I tell them stories about them all the time, because I'm sharing that, what they were, because who's going to carry that on after I'm gone?
Yes, absolutely. That legacy piece, that like normalizing those continuing bonds and talking about our people, because we feel such a responsibility to remember our person or our people. And if we can share that story, their memory, with others, it feels like less of a weight that we have to shoulder on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's keeping them alive, and they deserve to be their souls wherever they might be. I feel like they're still here, and whatever our belief system is, it's very personal, but everyone has a different way of dealing with that. I see signs. What do you like about signs?
Oh, I call them glimmers. Yes. I like the glimmers. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Every time I hear Don't Stop Believin' by Journey.
Oh my goodness.
No way. That was my brother's.
Oh.
He serenaded it to us at a bar a month before he died. And so every time I hear that, it's always like I turn on the radio and it's on.
Oh, it's freaky,
and it's
right?
Like, it's the freaky one, or or someone mentions it in this unique. Anyways, that's one of my glimmers from him.
It's my son's. I don't know why. I think it's because I have it on a playlist in the car, but he sings it all the time. He's 7 years old. My son loves singing. So he wakes up singing, he goes to sleep singing, he'll play Alexa and it'll be a song. Don't stop believing. He loves it. A lot, along with NSYNC as well.
Oh, yeah. So I guess as we start to wrap up this conversation, what would you say are 2 or 3 just important things for listeners to know about grief? And that could be grief myths we challenge or normalizing language. Like what do you think are those important things for listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think number one is probably the one I just said most recently, is about the kindness and the being kind to yourself, because it really does make a difference. And that also comes in conjunction with the support that you potentially and should have, which hopefully we do have, in terms of other family, friends, whatever it might be. Surround yourself with people that understand and know you. And the kindness thing, hopefully they will basically instill that in you to help you look after yourself and be kind to yourself, because that's what good friends should do. Yeah. I've been blessed so much with, that's why I'm here. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because if I didn't have that support network, those friends, those people that have just been there for me, I've actually lost a few along the way as well, but I think that's normal in some senses, not all the time, not to everybody, but that aside, for the most part, I'm here and I'm doing what I'm doing because I had the support. I had my husband, my kids, and my best friends, and all of those people that understood. So yeah, be kind to yourself. Lean on those that are around you to support you in that, that community to help you through it. I think other one, it'd just be just to sit with what you're feeling as well. Yeah. Kindness is one thing, but sitting and just don't push it down. Don't, when you do get those griefy moments, we're all very good at distraction, right? But and I do it, I put my hand up, but there's a difference between distraction and completely avoiding it. And when you avoid it, it's like Tyler Perry says, right? When you can go to school, you can go to work, you can go out with your friends, but grief will still be there when you get back. It'll always be there when you stop. And so if you deal with it right there, and then it's a lot easier the next time it hits as well. Processing all those emotions just releases everything. The crying, the whatever you might do to release your grief. I exercise and I do all sorts of other stuff to try and manage my grief and my mental health overall. When I have to sit with it, when it's uncomfortable, it is really uncomfortable at times, but you do get better at it. Absolutely. You do get better at it.
Because you're figuring out ways to integrate it into your day-to-day, into your grief rhythms.
So that's my 3 little tips.
Is there anything that you were hoping we were going to touch on that we haven't covered yet today?
Yeah, if it's okay. I mentioned briefly about physical stuff that I'd had over time, and I mentioned I had a foot surgery and that's why I couldn't get to see my dad. There's a lot of work that I feel like I would love to do as well when it comes to, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. And I suffer a lot with hypermobility and fatigued joints and injuries and things, and I'm getting old before my old time. My joints are. And I want to share with people that not so much to tell about all my struggles with my physical ailments, but to basically say that is grief. There are so many other elements to grief than just loss. And we deal with so many different other things in our lives that are grief. And physical stuff is one of my specialties. I've been dealing with it since I was about 11 years old. I had a major back surgery. It stopped me from really starting my teenage years in the normal way it should have done, and I wasn't able to do sports and things like that. So this whole thing I've had all through my life has shifted my trajectory of what I could have had or what life I could have had. Yeah. But equally, I've ended up with a really good one too. And so there's lots of stuff I can relate to people, and I understand about grief and physical ailments, not just loss or traumas with bodies and things like that, because I've been through a lot with surgeries throughout my life. And that's one area which I probably don't talk about enough, actually, because I know a lot of people might resonate with that. So I just wanted to mention that today.
No, I appreciate that, because I think grief touches so many different areas of life. It is so much more than just the physical death loss of a person, career changes, chronic illness diagnoses, all of that. There's grief there because it impacts how we're walking through the world in that day-to-day space. And there can be pain and fear and sadness and joy and relief and guilt and all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And some of these diagnoses, they happen not by choice, just as like physical death, grief. We don't choose that for ourselves. We don't choose that to happen to our people in the same way getting a diagnosis. We don't choose that. It just happens. And it's okay to have complicated, griefy feelings about it. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, thank you. You're right about that. It just adds another element and another layer to what you might already be going through as well. And that's okay. I would love people to know that it's okay, that what you're going through physically is not, you shouldn't dismiss it as just being, oh, I've got a bad something or other, or I've really been struggling with this and it's not something that's going to go away. And also the fact that it might be invisible to a lot of people too. I've got what I've got, no one can see it. And so that makes another element of, oh, is there really anything wrong with you? You look okay, just like grief, right? You look okay, having a good day. Are you really grieving? There's this invisible kind of element to it as well. Absolutely. Which a lot of people struggle with.
Absolutely. Moira, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
joining today. If listeners are interested in following or connecting with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch? And do you have any projects coming up?
Sure. So Griefspan Education is my handle for Instagram. I'm venturing into TikTok too, but I'm not quite there yet. I've started, but I'm not dancing. I'm just to make people aware. And griefspan.com is my website. So I do initial discovery calls with clients too. If you would like to, if anybody needs my help, I do grief education and grief coaching one-to-ones, but I have a discovery call on my website and through Instagram as well. I'm setting up groups, which I need to release too, so they'll be coming soon. And there's also a 28-day free grief tip calendar on my website and on Instagram as well. And I'm working on a bunch of other projects too, but I won't put them out here yet, just in case. Because
in case life happens.
Yeah, in case life happens. Yeah, exactly. Little by little. There's a Spanish term. Everything's little by little. So, yeah.
I love that.
It's really good. So they're the main ways that people can find me, and my door is always open and I'm always happy to help wherever I can.
And I will make sure to include all of those links in the show notes so that our listeners
can get
in touch.
And thank you so much for what you do too, my darling. You're amazing.
Oh, back at you. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember to be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms, with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.